Somebody's praying, I can feel it. Somebody's praying just for me. Mighty hands are guiding me to protect me from what I can't see. Lord, I believe. Lord, I believe. Somebody's praying for me. I can feel them. Your angels are watching over me. There's many miles ahead till I get home, till I'm safely kept before your throne. Lord, I believe. Lord, I believe. Your angels are watching over me. Well, I've walked barren wilderness where my pillow was a stone, and I've been through the darkest caverns where no light has ever shone. Still I go on, 'cause there's someone who was down on their knees. Lord, I thank you for those people who were praying just for me. Somebody's praying, I can feel it. Somebody's praying just for me. There's many miles ahead till I get home, till I'm safely kept for your throne. Lord, I believe. Lord, I believe. Somebody's praying for me. Somebody's praying for me.
I have to say, one of the things that blessed me most last night was all the prayer that was being offered up. All of those who were concerned. What happened was not of our planning, didn't happen in the order in which we expected and thought. But when the Lord moved, God's people began to pray and prayed and prayed. And we're not in a hurry, not trying to rush things, but letting God work in His time, because truly that work which God does is the work that needs to be done.
Amen.
Nothing we could accomplish. No rituals, rites, prayers to read people through. I was touched last night in so many ways. One thing particularly that blessed me was I was sitting over there, and Brother Ray brought Sister Wilma over to pray for her great-grandchildren. It reminded me when I was lost, seeking the Lord one Sunday at Bethel, and my great-grandmother was there, and somebody helped carry her down to pray for me. She was 90-some years old. She cared about my soul too. And I didn't get saved that day, but that made a deep impression on me. And I was moved to see that again last night. And it was just such a blessing. And I want to ask the church to keep praying, because I know this is a church that prays. I feel it. I feel it when I preach, when I try to minister, for I know that there are prayers being lifted up. For there is nothing here. But whatever the Lord does, little is much when God is in it. Amen. Little is much. And it's our desire today that we just follow the Lord in what He'd have of us. And we have some thoughts. If it be His will, we'll try to share those today. But if God is dealing with your heart, that's the most important matter of the day. Not our order, not our plans, but what He would be saying and doing in your heart today. And so my encouragement is to follow the Lord. I want to take a reading this morning in 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. I want to title the message, The Audacity of Faith. And after last night, as I was praying and meditating all this, and there's of course certain plans and preparation I've been making for this morning, and just didn't feel that it was that time. The Lord continued to lead my heart back to this passage, and I hope that there's something here that can be of help to you today. It's an often read and shared passage. It has lots of relevance to the need of the day. It's about the healing of Naaman and the leprosy that he was stricken with. It says in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1, Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet, that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment, and brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. And it was so, when Elisha, the man of God, had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me, and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place, and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spake unto him, and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he saith unto thee, Wash and be clean? Then he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. As we consider what's going on right here, Naaman was the captain of the army of Syria. Syria was the major superpower next to Israel at that time. There had already been skirmishes between the two countries. They had some sort of unsettled peace, but we understand from what we read that Syria had already overcome, plundered, and enslaved some of the people of Israel. That's how he had that little servant girl of Israel. But they were at this kind of momentary peace at the time. And when the word came and they heard about this opportunity and this need, the Syrians had this perspective about all of these things that were going on, and they had this sense of great superiority over the Israelites. They were a stronger nation. They had seen success against them. Now, at this point, they didn't want to go into a direct battle, perhaps because of what it would have cost them. But they certainly felt that they had the upper hand. And no doubt they thought that their gods and their superiority gave them success. But what we see in verse 1 was that the reason the Syrians had success was because it was given to them by the Lord. They thought they did it. The Lord says, I did it. I let you win. The Lord used heathen nations at times to do His will. And this man Naaman was a significant man in the nation of Syria. He would be our equivalent of a 4-star general. And not just in rank, but in success. He was perhaps kind of the Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf of the Syrians. He was held in high regard, especially by the king of Syria, because Naaman had been the one through whom Syria had achieved such great military victories. He was at the helm. His hand was upon the wheel that was moving the nation of Syria in such a powerful direction. And no doubt Naaman felt very secure, felt good about who he was, felt good about all that he'd accomplished. And he thought, I've done this. But again, the Lord says in verse 1, that was me. That was me. That wasn't Naaman. It wasn't the Syrians. I'm the one who gave them this success. And this is a man who seemed to have everything going well in his life. No doubt he was very wealthy, he was very respected, he was very successful, he was in a growing nation that was becoming more and more important and significant in the area, but he had this one problem: leprosy. You see, everything seemed to be so good, he seemed to be so successful, and he found the source of his success to be within himself. And maybe you today have found your degree of success in things. Maybe you have found yourself to be talented or bright, have accomplished something, made a name for yourself in some way, and have some degree of respect. And you may feel that somehow you've done this, you've earned this. But my friend, it's no different for Naaman than it is for you. You have nothing that did not come through the hand of God in your life. Nothing that didn't come through His hand. Everything seemed to be going well for Naaman, except he had this one problem. He was a leper. He was a leper. Apart from this, that man had everything else going on very well in his life. Leprosy back in Bible times was kind of a categorical term for several different skin diseases, and we don't know exactly which one it was, but they had these things in common. They were very contagious, they were disfiguring, and they are debilitating in some way. And so these diseases had this slow progression. Sometimes, I'm looking at some World Health Organization descriptions of leprosy, Leprosy can be a slow progression. Sometimes there's an incubation period of about 5 years, and it may take 20 years to appear, but it's something that's kind of inside. It's moving. It's insidious. And it manifests itself on the skin. And it doesn't just affect the skin. It's not just how you look, but it affects the underlying tissue. Oftentimes, even the nervous system. It goes and it affects the upper respiratory system, which affects your mucus, and that's how it's spread. It spreads via droplets from the nose and the mouth. That's why the lepers were called to cover their nose, their mouth, because that was how they would spread the disease to others. This disease of leprosy can affect the eyes. It can impair your vision or even eliminate vision. And there was a sophisticated diagnosis protocol that the Jewish people had, that God gave them, that their priests used when they were trying to diagnose whether someone truly had leprosy or not, because the concern was not just the individual, but the concern was how it would affect the whole population of people in the community if this was not contained. And the consequences of having leprosy was life-shattering. We read about what happened in Israel. Now, he was not from Israel, he was from Syria. But in Israel, the leprous person who has the disease is required to wear torn clothing. Wear torn clothing to signify their brokenness, in a sense. They're supposed to let the hair of their head hang loose to kind of show that they're undone. They're supposed to cover their upper lip because of being contagious and cry out, "Unclean, unclean." There is a degree of shame that accompanies this disease when they're around anyone else. And they're supposed to remain unclean as long as they have this disease, which there was no cure for leprosy at this time. And the person who has this is required to live alone, and his dwelling shall be outside the camp, which means isolation. And so all these things were just life-shattering to somebody who would have the disease of leprosy. And in this disease of leprosy, we see a very strong analogy to the sin condition that we have. The sin condition that exists in us apart from the saving grace of Jesus Christ. Because it's one of those insidious diseases, sin is. And it works in our heart, and it works in our mind, and it can seem to hide itself in lots of different ways, under good deeds and good works, good habits, things that you can learn. And so the full brunt of this can potentially have a long incubation period, but it's still there. It's still there. And my friend, if you don't know Christ today, if you've never been truly saved, you may be trying to hide the effects of sin in your life and all of those things, and you may not even fully understand the implications of what's going on inside of you. But my friends, it is there in your heart, and it is working, and it's going to rear its head, and it may take some time, and you may be able to hide it for a while, but it's going to come out, and it's going to become clear. And this disease will affect the skin. It will work itself out. It will become more and more perceptible in your life. And not just the outside, but it affects the nerves and the eyes. Your ability to feel and to perceive and to see. That's one of the reasons we encourage those who are lost to seek the Lord, because the opposite of seeking the Lord is to harden your heart. You are desensitizing yourself, if you will, to the working and the movement of the Spirit of God. And you don't want your nerves, your spiritual nerves, to be deadened like that. They need to be made alive. This disease of sin, like leprosy, is contagious. It comes to us through our first parents, Adam, and has been communicated to us through our fathers. But this disease of sin is also very communicable in the way it affects itself outwardly as we sin and sin against others and influence others in an ungodly way. We multiply the sin and we move it forward in its progression, and it can just become so ugly. There's also a degree of separation that comes with sin, right? As the leper was forced to move outside the camp and to be away from the people of God in the camp. And that's certainly what sin can do in our hearts and in our lives. And I know some of you feel what it's like to be on the outside, and you feel the loneliness of that, and not only the sense of wanting to be with the people of God, but you want God. I hope you want God. I hope you want Him in your heart. I hope you want Him in your life, and you feel that separation. Because that is what the disease of sin does to us. It separates us from God. It separates us from His people. And ultimately, if this disease is not remedied, it will separate you eternally from God and from His people. And as this disease continues to work and ravage in our lives, if it is unchecked, it will ultimately cause scarring and mutilation and brokenness in all sorts of different ways. It doesn't matter how good of a home you've been raised in, how many good habits you've been taught, how much your parents love you, your grandparents love you, your spouse loves you, my friend. The brokenness of sin is going to manifest itself if it is not addressed by Jesus Christ. And so as Naaman had this disease of leprosy, he obviously seemed to still be pretty functional. Still pretty effective, wasn't he? But there was no doubt some degree of hindrance to him in his daily life from this leprosy. And he knew, because of how leprosy works, that it was only going to get worse. It was only going to get worse. There was a coming personal catastrophe for him and for the whole nation, because he was the guy. He was the guy who held it all together, who made it all work, who made it so powerful, so special. And so Naaman's leprosy was a national concern for Syria. But in all of their success and all the things that they had done, they took captive a little maid, a young lady, who was enslaved and was a servant of Naaman's wife. And this young lady is remarkable. This young lady is absolutely remarkable, and indeed is one of the heroes of the story through whom God worked. Because as we consider how this young girl responded in contrast to the king of Israel, the king of God's people, when she understood the extent of Naaman's problem, she had great hope and great faith that this problem had a solution. All he needed to do was to go over to Israel, and there's a prophet over there in Israel, and there's a God behind that prophet, and that God can take care of that leprosy, no problem. I mean, God can take care of this. God's got this. Amen. But there you have the king of Israel, the leader of the people of God, that when he hears about this, he tears his clothes. His response was angst. His response was suspicion. These people must be out to get me. The Syrians are trying to create some sort of ruse by which they're going to attack us and restart the war. I don't know what's going on. And so he was beside himself. But this little girl who had been taken captive, she was enslaved. Her life had been marred by personal tragedy. She wasn't at home where she grew up with her mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and the family and the village that she was from. She had been taken from that, experienced that loss, come over and made to serve people who were not her own. And in this place, despite everything that happened to her, she still believed in God. She still believed in God. She still had this faith. And in fact, not only did she have this faith, she offered something to Naaman that she had never seen. She offered something to Naaman that she had never seen. Now, she knew about the power of this God, but I have it on good authority that she had never seen a leper cleansed before. Good authority. So how do you know that girl never saw a leper cleansed before? I mean, that doesn't say that there. Well, it's because Jesus said it. Jesus said in Luke 4:27, there were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. That girl believed in something she had never even seen. She believed the potential that God could do something that heretofore had not been done, at least not during her lifetime. And she believed. She believed. Like Abraham, who in hope believed against hope, believed that he would become the father of many nations as God had told him. This young lady, even though she had been enslaved in a foreign land, serving people who were the enemies of her people, she was young, had never seen a leper cure, said, our God in Israel can take care of that. He can take care of that. You see the audacity? The audacity of such faith to believe something she had never seen. But that became the catalyst for what the Lord would do here with Naaman. And as this delegation came from Syria to Israel, and they came to the king, and they came with a great sum of money and things that we'll talk about in a moment. The king of Israel's response to this delegation was anger, was tearing his clothes, was suspicion. Tearing your clothes was a sign of great sadness. It was an outward expression of something going on the inside. And he tore up his clothes, he was mourning, he was in despair. And the interesting thing was that the request was never for the king of Israel to take care of this. It was never about, there's a king in Israel who can take care of this. It's no, there's a God in Israel and there's a prophet in Israel who has a connection to this God, and this God can help take care of this leprosy. But here was this king who kind of interposed himself in here and thought that this was all on him, and he was completely in despair and tearing his clothes, and quite honestly, it was a shame that the king of Israel would be in such despair rather than looking to God. Amen. It was a shame that the king of Israel, one who was meant to lead the people of God and to be a representative to them and to be connected to the Lord, was the one who was just giving up and throwing all hope away. And Elisha, when he heard that the king was tearing his clothes over this, Elisha sent to the king. And he said, they need to know that there is a prophet in Israel. There is a God in Israel. This shouldn't go on like this. And for those of us who know the Lord today and who are burdened and who desire to see souls saved, Satan, the enemy, can tempt us to discouragement and despair. He can tempt us to kind of take upon us that torn cloth look, right? That we just don't know that anything can be done about this. But my friend, we need to be much more like that little girl than the king of Israel in this circumstance. We need to be much more like that young lady who had such strong faith. And Elisha, when he heard about that, he said to the king, "Why are you tearing your clothes? Send this guy to me. He will know there's a prophet in Israel." And so Naaman came to Elisha. And he came with a great entourage. He came burdened with baggage. He came burdened with baggage, didn't he? We read about a great sum of money that was sent along to pay for this healing. It was 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 outfits. I was looking it up today, trying to figure how much this would be. The silver amounted to about $254,000 in today's exchange rate. The gold amounted to about $4.4 million. And I don't know where the outfits came from, but they probably weren't the Costco ones that you get, or Harbor Freight or wherever y'all get your clothes. But they probably were someplace nice, probably really well handmade outfits, probably worth a whole lot of money, more kind of along the Armani line that they sent along. So I just guesstimate here about $5 million was sent to Israel from Syria to pay for this man to be healed. There was an expectation that they could buy this healing, that there was a price to be paid, and that they would gladly pay the price, that they could do enough to make this happen, to effectuate this change. And even though they couldn't do it on their own, they had something worthwhile that would move and motivate the God of Israel to take care of this. But Elisha didn't ask for a penny of it. He didn't want a penny of it. There was nothing that could be bought, nothing that could be paid for, nothing that could be done in order to merit what was about to happen in this place. And so Naaman would have to drop that baggage. When we see what Elisha told Naaman to do, which was to go and dip himself in the Jordan 7 times, we see that Naaman was also carrying some baggage of national pride. The Jordan? He was thinking that there's somehow virtue in that water. The Jordan River? That muddy little backwater? I have got way better rivers over in Syria than you all have here in Israel. Way more grand, beautiful rivers over there than there are in Israel. You see, this man had a sense of national pride. I don't know, I'm trying to learn the geography here, but maybe for you all, it'll be like someone telling you to go dip yourself in the Chattahoochee rather than the Tennessee River. It's just like, we got our river, we don't need yours. What good's that? We have our own river, it's fine, right? That's the sense of national pride, and Naaman would have to drop that baggage to get healed, wouldn't he? He also had a sense of personal pride. When he pulled up at Elisha's house, he was essentially pulling up in the modern day equivalent of a stretch limo, with his entourage and the chariots and all those things to Elisha's house. And what did Elisha do in verse 10? He sent a messenger unto him and said, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times. Elisha didn't even come to the door. He didn't go to look out the window and see how big the chariots were and how impressive it all was and the horses and all the people. He just stayed where he was at. He had his messenger and he said, go tell him this is what he needs to do. That had to be an affront to the pride of Naaman. In fact, Naaman had some very strong expectations about how this was going to go down, how this needed to happen. In fact, when Elisha sent a messenger and told him what to do, it tells us in verse 11 that Naaman was angry. He was angry. He was angry at the way this was all going because this was not what he wanted. It was not what he expected. And he went away. He actually left Elisha's house when he heard this. He didn't stick around. He left. Because why? He said, this is the way it's supposed to happen. He's supposed to come out to me and stand and call on the name of his Lord and strike his hand over the place, and then it'll all be better. That's the way it's supposed to happen. That's what I expect. That's the way the gods work in my land. But Proverbs tells us in 16:25 that there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is the way of death. There are things that we think, this ought to happen this way. I expect this, and I'm kind of angry. I'm kind of frustrated. I just kind of feel like because I sought the Lord, I should have it by now, and I don't have it by now, and I'm frustrated. I'm kind of angry. I'm kind of tired because it's not all happening the way I want it to. I've done everything that I can. Why don't I have this? I'm tired. I just give up. But my friend, this is not on your terms. Amen. This is on God's terms. It's in God's way. Naaman was looking for some sort of Benny Hinn moment to get smacked or something like that and all be better. But that's not what God had planned for him. He had a humbling remedy. A humbling remedy. To go down to the waters of the Jordan and to dip himself 7 times. There was nothing special about the waters of the Jordan. You don't see this prescribed as the way all lepers could be healed from here on out. This was specifically what the Lord said to Naaman through Elisha. This is what you need to do. And so as Naaman went there to the waters and he dipped himself 7 times, 7 being a number of completeness, I think the sense is that Naaman had to completely surrender his baggage. He had to completely surrender the thought that he could buy this and he could earn this. He had to surrender his national pride. He had to surrender his personal pride. He had to surrender his expectations and come to the Lord the way that the Lord had said that he needed to seek Him, the way that he needed to seek this healing. And my friends, today for us, it truly is that simple. It really is that simple to just listen to the Lord and to hear what He has to say, because He's not trying to make this complicated for you. He's not wanting to make this hard. We are the ones who make it hard for ourselves. Amen? I mean, don't we make it hard for ourselves? But when we really get out of the way and just listen to the Lord, He makes it easy for us in a sense. Paul, writing in Romans, says in Romans 10, he says, "For Moses writes about the righteousness that is based on the law, that the person who does the commandments shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is, to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss, that is, to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? It says the word is near you, in your mouth and your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim." There is no great deed to do in this place today. There is only to surrender yourself to what the Lord has said. And my friend, if you have heard the gospel and the Spirit of God is working in your heart, you have everything you need to be saved. Amen. Everything you need to be saved today. Kind of like the servant of Naaman said to him, if you were told that, you could buy this for $1 million, I mean, wouldn't you be going out and working and trying to save up all that you could? Try to gather all that, or if it was to bench press a certain amount, wouldn't you be trying to get strong enough, or to run a mile in a certain speed? Wouldn't you be training? If it was to acquire or do something, wouldn't you be trying to do it? If you knew your eternity hung in the balance over this, wouldn't you do any of those things? If you could just have a list of do this and this and this, and then you'll have it, wouldn't you do it? I think many of you would. You would be all about that. But when it comes to simply obeying what the Lord said and the simplicity of seeking Him until you find Him, we find ourselves going, no, not that. Not that. Why? Because we find ourselves still clutching to so many things. And the whole point of this passage is that you have to let it go. Acts 17:27, Paul speaking on Mars Hill, speaking about that they should seek God. All nations of the world should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward Him and find Him. Yet He is actually not far from each one of us. Friends, I don't know if you've ever dropped your keys under the car at night and you can't see there very well to find them, and you're carrying a bunch of stuff out. You're not going to find your keys while you're holding all that stuff in your hands. You're going to have to let it go. You're going to have to put those things down. I know if you're like me, I'm one of those guys who wants to carry every bag of grocery into the house in one trip. Right? You want to get it all, you want to get it done, and we want to just carry it all. But my friends, if you're going to find those keys, you've got to be willing to set those things all down and get down there on your hands and knees and start feeling your way in the dark to find those keys, because the keys are there. The keys are there. You heard them drop. They can't be too far away. The keys are there. And what Paul is telling us there in Acts, what he says to those people at Mars Hill, he says, the keys are there. God is there. He is not far from us. He is near to us. He is in this place. He has been in our midst. He is not far away. If you would just seek after Him and feel after Him and drop the baggage and look for Him with all of your heart, you're going to find Him. And he says this with as much assurance and truth and faith as the words given to Naaman by Elisha on that day for how to get his leprosy healed. Go to the Jordan, dip 7 times, and your skin will be like new. And it was just as true and it was real. Naaman did it and he was healed. And today, the truth is the same for you, that if you will seek the Lord with all of your heart, you will be saved. Amen. You will be saved. For He has promised it in His Word. This is the word of God to you, sick with the sinful disease of leprosy of the heart. He says, you will seek me and find me when you seek with all your heart. Amen. You will seek me and you will find me when you seek with all your heart. Will you heed the words of the Lord today? My friends, this is more important than what Elisha told Naaman, because it's not just a skin disease. This is your eternity at stake here. Heaven and hell, a real hell, a real place meant only for the devil and his angels, but that will enlarge itself for you too, is in the balance. Is in the balance today. But you need to seek the Lord. You don't have to go there. But the Lord has made a way. And if you will seek Him and drop everything else and seek Him until you find Him with all your heart, you are going to find Him today. Let's have a song of invitation. God is dealing with your heart. You've heard the call. You know the cry. You know what Jesus is saying today, and there is nothing more important. I don't care what your agenda is today. Drop it. Drop it. Use those hands, use that heart to seek the Lord rather than clutching whatever plans you have at this moment as we stand and sing, brother.